for it. There's a little spinning ball to stop spinning. Does that make sense? Oops. I need to turn on my... Testing 1, 2, 3. Here we go. All right, are we broadcasting? I can't tell exactly, but I'll do the best I can. Hey friends, thank you for joining me today. My name is Dan Nelson. Maybe you already know that. And I've been working for the last couple days, among other things, on this large commission of a garden painting, 40 by 60 inches. I've had lots of interaction with my client, and that interaction led to this very developed sketch that I printed off. This is a watercolor sketch modified with Photoshop. And so that's what I'm following, but when I need to draw specific things, then I've been going to the internet. Let me give you a quick tour. In fact, let me move you around here a little bit. So I called this painting flowers. I certainly don't consider myself a... Are those hostas? No. Nancy, what are those blue ball?
Hydrangeas. Hydrangeas.
Hydrangeas. They both start with the letter H. Hydrangeas there. Back in the background, some irises, black-eyed Susans. Up in the foreground, I had a lot of fun with this, daylilies. And I just a few minutes ago finished painting the climbing hydrangea. So let me back up here a little bit. So I've been going to Google and downloading, scrolling through several images and then downloading one or two. So that was my go-by. That helps me. I need to add a few more leaves. I'm just realizing a little bit more leaves. All kinds of challenges, of course, in this painting. Down here at the bottom is some lilies of the valley, and some ferns. I'm really happy with my ferns, and I don't know how well you can see those, but I like the way those turned out. So I have basically two flowers to go yet. One is a coral something rose. It doesn't matter. I don't care if I remember the name of it, but here's some photos to go by. So when it's time to do those roses. Oh, also there's butterflies. I think I counted a total of 13 butterflies in the scene. And of course a dog right here that my grandson Izzy keeps telling me, it doesn't look very finished. Because it's not finished yet. I'm saving the dog to last, evidently. Fairly happy with my swing. Okay, but what I'm working on right now, when I decided to start this broadcast, was dogwood. It dawned on me that this might be a little teaching opportunity here. So, first of all, when I did a Google search for dogwood, I got all these glorious state fair winning flower scenes. I don't mean that literally, I mean it figuratively. If you look up hydrangeas, you find the most glorious, over-the-top, beautiful hydrangeas on a Google search. That's what comes up most. And that would be completely unrealistic for a painting. It would be to have every kind of flower just like as good as Google would be crazy, especially with dogwood. Now, those of you, I'm going to turn this off for a minute. Does that work? Can you still see me well? I think you can. Those of you who are not from the part of the country where dogwoods grow, they are a beautiful flowering tree. The flowers come out without any leaves, so it's in a nice, intricate branch system, kind of horizontal branches, covered with white flowers. Every flower has 4 petals. But if you Google dogwood or dogwood tree, again, you'll get this profuse, you get prize-winning dogwoods. And believe it or not, as a weird artist, those actually aren't my favorite dogwoods. I love the plant, but I think where the dogwoods are most beautiful is actually wild dogwoods in the woods, and they're much more feathery, lacy. It doesn't look like a giant snowball, which is what, the highly cultivated, trimmed, and a tree that's being babied and taken care of is just a huge ball of white. Beautiful, certainly, if it's in your front yard. But that's not where this is. So this is a dogwood in the woods. So thankfully, I did look up dogwood tree in the woods, and I was working on that when I decided to bring you in. Thanks, Izzy. Comment here from Mark. Hey, Mark. Mark from New Zealand. That's a joke. That's a joke. I'm kidding. Anyway, he's been catching the night shift. Mark, way over. And what time is it there? I think you're 6 hours ahead of us, aren't you? So it's already nighttime there. Okay, dogwood. So this is perhaps a little bit of skill. I use this a lot. First of all, the dogwood flowers are white. But how do you paint white things? Class, how do you paint white things? The answer is you don't paint them white, at least especially in the early stages. So I've mixed up a fairly dirty blue-green or warm gray, you could say even. And I was rolling my brush. Now I need to decide how far I want these dogwoods. Rolling my brushes like this. Which I do quite a bit, I realized, because it helps give a very feathery look that's not overworked. That's probably enough of enough feathering. And do one more bit up here. Now, I will mix a lighter batch, a lighter version of that color. So still not perfectly white, but lighter than it was. And I'm going to come in here and just hit a few standout blossoms. And hopefully, again, and I'm looking at my photograph pretty much. So the dogwoods tend to come in, the flowers in banks, in rows. A branch is pointing at the viewer this way. And
there's 2 more comments.
Good, okay, good. More comments. Here in Brisbane. Yes, you are, Kiwi. And Susan's airing. Thank you, Susan. Good to have you guys here today. What fun. I don't have thousands of viewers, but I honestly do enjoy the 12 that I get. Okay, so back to flowers. This is going to be a fairly short broadcast, I think. Yeah, I'm squinting, I'm standing back, I'm saying, yeah, and I'm looking at my photograph. Companies coming in the front door. What a great time to be alive. Yeah, that looks quite a bit like a dogwood tree in the woods. Hello. Cameron and Kelsey just walked in the front door with baby Claire in utero. We're excited about Claire's arrival any day now. Really, I think if I do any more, I'll be getting into trouble. Now, I do want to do one other thing, especially since this is way up here in the corner. I'm going to just soften some of that just a little bit. Diminish the energy. I was thinking earlier today as I was painting, one of the big challenges about painting is knowing when to quit, right? We all know that. We all experience that. We're all aware of that. It dawned on me that that's not really the question or the issue as much as Mark Toomey. Do you really remember number 1? That is amazing. Bless you. Thank you. Hey, Bruno. You're from Germany, right? Good to have you. What fun. Oh, that's great. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Okay, let's expand now. I'm going to move your position a little bit. Let's do roses now. So I think I'm done with the dogwoods. One more quick look. There. That didn't take long, did it? And of course, there were some things underneath there that were already dogwood-ish before I started with this final layer. Hey, before I do those roses, oh, forgive me. Let me come back to these climbing hydrangeas. And I need to, let me go back to my photograph of climbing hydrangeas that I downloaded. There it is. And take a look at those leaves. Yeah, individual leaves. Perfect, whatever, leaf-shaped, teardrop shape. And I've got some lighter green on my brushes right now. And just want to come in here and just do a few highlight leaves where the sun is hitting. That's probably good enough. Now, let's go to these, I forget what they're called, coral something, I'm forgetting. Okay, so here's some of my images. A whole bush. You know, I'm going to edit this one a little bit. The light's coming, if I turn it around, then the light will actually be coming from the correct side for my painting. So that'll help a little bit. Let's erase the other one. And then look at it, just a couple close-ups. Again, just for fun, let's turn this one around so the light's coming from the right direction. I'm trying to gain a visual understanding of these flowers. And let me take just a minute to Google that, because it's bothering me that I can't remember what they're called. I think it's coral roses. That's not it. Coral something. I saw it the other day when I was doing a search, but now I'm not finding it. So I'm not going to worry about it too much. It's coral something, not just coral. Coral refers to the color, of course. Knockout, that's it. Knockout. Coral knockout rose. There we go. That's just for you botanists. Good enough. Okay. Let's go back to my gallery. Knockout roses, that's what they're called. All right. And definitely a salmon, coral. That's why they're called coral, right? So let's mix up some of that. And I have some brushes with some dirty orange on it. Let's just wipe those off. And that should be good enough to start. Okay, so I've made this sort of mild joke. Ever so mild, nobody really would notice it was a joke. But I made it several times. How do you paint something white? And the answer is don't use white. A similar thing could be said. So how do you paint bright coral colored roses? Well, the answer is you don't start out with bright coral colored paint, right? You start with the darker version of where you want to go to. So right now I'm mixing something called diamond orange I just happen to know that's what it's called because I Picked up the tube a little while ago. It's from the Charvan Paint Company. Charvan out of France. Sorry, my good friends over there. So I'm diamond orange, oxide red, and a little bit of liquid. So I'm quite a bit darker. Oh, and some Scarlet Lake too. So there we go. So in other words, any object that you're painting, you start by painting the shadow side, the dark side of that object. Of course, and our light's coming from the left, although this part of the painting is pretty much all in shade. So this is not going to be spectacular light and shadow effects like elsewhere in the painting. But there will still be some light and dark, of course. And yes, I'm looking at my photograph fairly frequently, seeing that, yes, there are small buds mixed in among the big ones. Let me repeat for some of you who weren't watching me the other day when I was it yesterday, I guess, working on this. So the last 2 days. This is a commission piece, and as always, when you're doing a commission, especially in this case, there's been a lot of instruction given to me by the client. Yes, and yes, that makes me a little bit nervous. I probably would not be finishing this painting to this degree of detail were it not for the instruction of my client. Now, of course, my goal is to make a drop-dead gorgeous painting in spite of any instructions that I might get, right? So you can't use that as an excuse. You can't say, well, it's a bad painting because. Your challenge as an artist, as a professional in this case, my challenge is to take everything they've said and create a beautiful painting in spite of that. Okay, let me just stop there, pause there for a moment and point at this. It's already working quite well. And the reason is because of the layers. So there's already 7, 8, 9 layers of work underneath what I'm doing right now. And it is the interplay of those layers that makes this beautiful. I think what I'm often sensing is that student painters often, not all of them of course, but they often have a wrong impression of the act of painting. Let me use a funny story, or not, well, actually an example first of all, and then a story. If you line up an expert painter and a third grader, and you give them each an assignment to do a painting of a pumpkin, the third grader will beat the heck out of the excellent painter if it's a race, because the third grader knows how to paint pumpkins. He'll reach out, open the jar of orange paint, grab a brush, paint a circle, put a stem on it, maybe a few stripes on the pumpkin if he's a sophisticated, and he's done, right? It's easy. That's how you paint a pumpkin. What's the challenge, he says. I don't get it. What's taking you so long? That's, of course, an exaggeration. But I often have the sense that beginner painters bring too much of that mindset into their painting. And if they're going to paint roses, they just roll up their sleeves, so to speak, stick out their tongue, grab their brush, their tiny brush, and just start paint a rose, paint a rose, paint a rose, paint a rose. Does that make sense? Conversely, okay, so how does the excellent painter paint a pumpkin? Well, whereas the third grader, 8-year-old kid, breaks out the orange paint, the mature painter probably breaks out purple, the opposite blue, opposite end of orange, and then does some hooker's green, and then brings them some phthalo blue and some oxide red. And if you're me, you break out a pencil, you do a bunch of scratching. And here's what I'm trying to say. The excellent painter sees the act of painting the pumpkin, in this case roses, as a process. Step, as I used to have a professor said, step 1-ly, 2-ly, 3-ly. Okay, so my story along those lines, just because it comes to mind and it's kind of funny, it's sort of related to painting a pumpkin. When I was 15 years old, and it helps to understand this story if you understand that I was one of those kids. I was the one kid in gym class that matured, yes, hit puberty later than everybody else. Okay? That comes with its own particular shades of struggle and so on and so forth. But I was that kid. All the men listening to me know exactly what I was that kid. Okay, so when I was 15, I could easily pass for probably 11 or 12. Now it just so happened it's kind of, to be fair. So now you know my struggle. At the same time, I was the star of the high school cross country team. Yeah, I beat all these big hairy dudes to a pulp. And I was the first chair trumpet, and I was the best artist in school. So, you know, we all have our issues, right? Oh, don't wiggle that. Anyway, in the small town that I lived in, somebody announced that there was going to be for Halloween, a window painting competition on the main street of the town. And the businesses were opening up their storefront windows to be painted with tempera paints, things of a Halloweenish theme. I don't know if you could even do this kind of thing nowadays, but anyway, it was an innocent time. So it was an art competition, for goodness sake, and I'm 15. What do you think I'm going to do? So I enter the competition. I actually mentioned this on my website. Some of you might have seen it. It turns out no other self-respecting 15-year-old would show up to paint windows on a store. But I'm an artist. I didn't let stuff like that stop me, right? So I got there, and every other kid, and that is the word, there wasn't another kid there, I don't think, over 8 years old. And I'm 15. Of course, I only look 12, but everybody else is. That was a little embarrassing, except, of course, I know that I'm going to just school all these kids. And if any of them are paying attention, or their parents, I'm going to school other parents. Anyway, and I remember I had a jewelry store. For anybody that cares, by the way, all this happened in Traverse City, Michigan, if anybody wants to look that up. So we started painting. And of course, all the other kids down the street from me, they're painting pumpkins and witches, right? So they bust out their orange paint. They bust out their black paint. And they're done in 25, 30, 40 minutes, maybe an hour and a half, right? My store, the owner of the jewelry store, he keeps coming out and looking at his window. All the other windows on the whole street are gorgeous. I mean, you know, in a very juvenile kind of way, gorgeous. Beautiful orange pumpkins, corn stalks, you know, goblins and witches. Very cutely drawn by all these cute little munchkin kids. Meanwhile, he comes out and looks at his window. It's a jewelry store, for goodness sake. You know, the guy's got a little bit of class. And his window is a mess. It's just a disaster. It's got black streaks and drips and runs and brown, black and brown, and it's ugly. I could see it all over his face. It was funny. He'd look down the street and say, doggone it, why couldn't I had one of those other kids? I got this 12-year-old loser here. Thinks he's an artist. Sorry. Well, you kind of know where this story's going, don't you? It's sounding a little self-aggrandizing, is it? But it was funny. It really was. And then, of course, you see what's going on. Even at that age, of course, I had some understanding of process. So my painting started out way uglier than everybody else's, but 4 hours later, when I'm wrapping up. By the way, it was the year that the United States landed an astronaut on the moon. So my painting, it was my dad's idea, to be honest, was to have an astronaut with a trick-or-treat bag, and in the world, the Earth, the blue dot floating above him in space, a witch was flying across the Earth. Clever dad, very clever. I got credit for his cleverness. That happened a lot at our house, by the way. Very clever parents. We got credit sometimes for the cleverness that actually came from our parents. Yay for clever parents. Anyway. Now, by the time the sun went down, the owner of the jewelry store would come out and strut his stuff. Everybody else's looked like kids, and he had a Rembrandt Jr. painting on his window. You'll forgive that little bit of self-aggrandizing story, just to make the point. So how do you paint roses? The answer is process, process, process. I think I'm pretty much done here. Now, the only thing I do want to do here before I leave is mess this up a little bit. One of the ways I mess it up is with a fan brush. If that doesn't do it enough, and especially along over here around the edge. Yeah, a lot of comments.
A comment or two.
All right, let's see. Thank you, Izzy. Let me look and see what's going on here. Yes, Bruno, Germany, gotcha. Mark says, I still learn something every time I watch. Appreciate the journey of discovery, laughs, and your expertise, Dan. Thank you very much, Mark. I appreciate it. Thanks for hanging in there with me, you guys. Coral Pantone color of the year. Are you serious, Susan? That is hilarious. You're a graphic designer, I take it, Susan. She says that this color is the Coral Pantone color of the year. And there's a Pantone number for that, too, by the way. And yeah, at least I know what Pantone is, Susan, so I know enough. And David Mercer's back on. Hey, David. I'm sorry that you were listening to that story. My friend from Quebec always turns in at my most arrogant moments. Thanks, David. Good to see you. See you again. And, David, there's no question I'm overdoing it. Yeah, was this the reason to move to North Carolina? Yeah. So, David, David Mercer, I'm assuming you heard, I gave the same excuse last night. Let me back up so you can see the whole painting a little bit. I'm just about finished. Yes, and if this wasn't, I have to finish the dog and the brickwork here. I'll do that on a different broadcast. I do consider the whole painting, David, as David points out, pretty much overdone. I'm hoping it will be seen as a good painting, in spite of the fact there's too much detail sort of everywhere. Now, tomorrow I'm going to do this. I have to finish this part today because tomorrow is glazing day. Then hopefully Monday is delivery day. And I do hope and plan and believe that I can redeem, that I can fix the painting a little bit. Let me give you just a little insight here. This some of you, David in particular. So my client sent me photographs of not just one or two, but bunch of birdhouses, bunch of birdhouses, and then close-ups. Okay, they said, "Here's our birdhouses." And then yesterday, now I'm not ridiculing, please understand, but I just want you artists, fellow artists, to kind of go, that happens sometimes. They actually sent me a close-up of their gravel. Are you with me? And said, now it's usually lighter than this. This was a cloudy day. You with me? So that's the reason why all this is down here. Because I feel strongly that if I don't respond in some way, they'll say, well, it doesn't look like our gravel. Are you with me? So, again, the joys and travails of being a working artist. Now, having said all that, let me defend myself and say, doggone it, this is a nice painting. And there's a lot of people in the world, I'm not done with this tree either, I just realized. There's a lot of people in the world that really like paintings with a lot of stuff to look at. They can look at. So let me take a quick count. How many identifiable brands, species of plants? Lilies of the valley, ferns, rose, climbing, dogwood, whatever that's called, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 that I count. 12 very carefully prescribed by my client. 12 kinds of flowers, swing, birdhouse, fence, dog, and butterflies. There's 13 butterflies scattered among there. So again, that was the assignment. Oh, and grass. So I guess that makes us 13. 13 identifiable species of plant. So, you know, I'm feeling pretty good about it. I'm hoping that when my client sees the painting, that their insistence on specificity will be overcome by, I hope, the beauty of the painting. So we'll find out. We'll all find out together, hopefully on Monday when I deliver the painting. All right, I'm going to stop there. I've painted some flowers for you and talked about process. Good painters think of painting as process. Step 1, 1-ly, 2-ly, 3-ly, or in my case, generally 13, 14, 15 layers or 15 stages of the painting process. Tomorrow will be glazes. Oh, and I was going to say, I do hope to manipulate the painting with broad strokes tomorrow, that I think I can push the dogwoods back just a tiny bit. And I think I can diminish the busyness of this corner, again, just a tiny bit by darkening this and even darkening this, again, tiny bit, so that my main composition, which is I want to be this wedge of light that's coming, starts wide and comes down here, that will really, that's what carries the painting. Let me say this, what carries every painting is the composition, the bones, the skeleton of the painting. All the details don't matter if the skeleton isn't solid. And I think this skeleton is solid, but I want to reinforce it a little bit tomorrow. This will all be dry, and I can do some glazes. Okay, thanks guys for watching. Great fun. Thanks here, Germany, Norway, New